organizational standpoint, a Vailsburg Irish organizational standpoint, things got turned upside down because, John lost the primary in '78, and then it became once again the Irish instinct came to fore to survive. So that's what they did. They bundled together, and we all survived. We elected Ray Durkin as the Democratic chairman, the Essex County Democratic chairman. He went on to a legendary career.
Yep.
He'll always be my chairman. And that's why we have every year, this year, we're going to celebrate the 10th anniversary of his passing. And it was something that we promised him. Another aspect of the Irish, which is loyalty. We promised Raymond that we would never forget him. And that's the reason why we always have that luncheon for him the first week in December every year. But my career from there went on. I had a partner, very accomplished musician, great writer, trained as a photographer. He and I set up a partnership, and that's where my firm was established as far back as 1980, I guess it was, 80, 81. And then we went on to there. We were legislative and county commission campaigns, and we got involved in gubernatorial politics. It's all part of the record at this point, looking back. But there was a magnetism about Vailsburg. And speaking of your Uncle George, who was one of my all-time favorite people. He was very close. He was Ray Durkin's Cardinal Richelieu. He was a brilliant guy. And I don't know if it was he or there was a story he used to like to tell. And this is why the character of the people from Vailsburg was so fascinating to me. It was almost magnetic to me because I would listen to one, listen to the other, and it was an education. Just being with these fellows, the Durkins and the Cryans and the Giblins. These guys were the best there was. And politics my father used to describe the politics in the 60s as the age of Pericles. And he simply would say, because you could cut a handshake with a deal. It was a matter of you could trust people in those days. You literally, to some degree, you had to be wily, you had to be careful, you had to be crafty like everybody in Vailsburg was, looking over their shoulders and everything else who's coming at you. But it was just a matter of, figuring out, where it was. George, your Uncle George, was always one of my favorites. There's two stories. I don't know, lorded over by the mayors. The mayors are what controls Hudson County politics. It doesn't emanate from county government. It emanates from all the satellite mayors and all around the county. It's different in Essex County. But there's a certain understanding looking back. It's not nostalgic, but there's a certain understanding that there was a sense of goodness that came out of Sacred Heart Church and Vailsburg. It's always going to hold a place of regard in my heart because not only did I learn a lot, but I actually saw the goodness in the Irish. And I can only imagine what it was like, them all growing up next door to each other, the Housen, the Durkins, and the Cryans, and the Giblins. It must have been wild, but it must have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of that is what prompted this, because those are the types of stories.
And they were all very avuncular figures to me. After the turmoil in the primary in 78, 79, difficulties with John and Charlie, and then I went to work for Ray Durkin in 1980, and boy, did I learn a lot. I really learned a lot. He became the chairman at that point, and he had a great run. We had a great run. And I would get the tough assignments from him, the political assignments from him. It was better than going to graduate school. It was as good as it gets. Every day there was something new,
When Ray got sick with my mom, was literally running to Kessler to try to find him 10 years ago.
Right.
And got to do an oral history. I wanted to hear the stories because every time I'd see him, I don't know how many years later, decades later, he would just come over to me. He'd put his hands on my shoulder and he would say, "Your uncle was my best friend."
That's right.
And he would just nearly sob in my face. And I know I didn't get it.
No, they were glued together. He was brilliant, George. George was crafty. You couldn't get over on him. You just couldn't. The people in the North Wards, Big Steve Adebato would tell me this all the time. You can't get past that George McCormick. He's a fearsome one, that kind of thing. But if I can leave you with anything and tell my colleagues, who I hope will join you at some point, that I'm always grateful to have been adopted by the Vailsburg Irish, You can quote me on that. It was the best education I ever got. The characters, the generosity, the hospitality. Ray Durkin was one of the great old-time county and state chairmen, along with Tom Giblin. These were men of high standing, good intentions, generosity. Look at the church, the church that they kept intact there all those years, Sacred Heart Church, to their credit. It had to be a wonderful place to grow up, but it was a wonderful place to be adopted to, That was the epicenter of all the politics, So I hope I've been some help to you,
This is great.
Went over to see him. He shook hands with me at the end of the night and opened up my hand, and there was some money in there. Ray Durkin. I have a son who's recovering over 15 years. I called Ray. I told Chris that if it wasn't for his father, my son would be dead. Ray never asked me for a favor. Never asked me for anything. He just did it.